everyone. Welcome back to Newsroom. I'm Chella Smith. This is your Middle East U.S. entertainment news here on YouTube. I air on Friday. I bring you the latest on reforms and economics of Iraq based on reports put out by the Middle East news media outlets or journalists. I do this weekly review and it's based off my interest. Thank you everyone for joining me. Last week we spoke about the CBI, the Iraqi Stock Exchange, the World Bank Group, reforms, the banking sector, and if Sudani would save Iraq. Let's take a look at this week's headlines. And there was a lot going on this week in Iraq and in the United States. But first, let's talk about the Turkish president, Erdogan, is scheduled to visit Erbil in the midst of ongoing negotiations with Baghdad. Turkish President Erdogan plans to include Erbil in his upcoming visit to Iraq, focusing on resolving bilateral issues between the two cities. The one-day visit, scheduled for November 22nd, will include discussions on the Iraqi-Turkey relations. Iraq has set a deadline for operating the significant port of Fall. The Iraqi Prime Minister of Transport has confirmed that the Greater Fall port open date is in early 2025, with 90% of the first section of the road and bridges completed. The port is set to undertake several projects, including a LNG station, a grain terminal, marine base, and berths. A lot of changes in Iraq. The National Bank of Iraq's General Authority has announced a 20% increase in its capital to 400 billion dinars. The National Bank of Iraq has approved a recommendation to increase its capital from 300 billion to 400 billion dinars through retained earning and free share distribution. The bank also approved cash dividends to shareholders and plans for financing the opening of 7 branches in 2024. The bank's financial platform in 2023 was praised for its flexibility and rapid response to economic and political changes. The bank's profit after taxes increased by 190 billion dinars, with the net interest income and total income increasing by 46 and 217%, respectively. Al-Ali Bank of Iraq has expanded its ATM networks by 50 devices and opening 5 new branches in 2023, including one in Saudi Arabia. The bank offered advanced cash counting and sorting centers and providing investment services. The bank has opened a new account with JP Morgan and increased financial transactions with Citibank. Future plans include expanding branches networks by 7 to 38 and ATM networks to 400, focusing on electronic banking services and financial services. If you want more details regarding this, you can find more on my Patreon. The National Bank of Iraq's General Authority has announced a 20% increase in capital to 400 billion dinars. The Central Bank of Iraq's Information Technology and Payment Department reported a rise in financial movement through electronic payment devices to 9 trillion 800 billion Iraqi dinars in the past year, attributed to an increased usage by citizens and employees. The number of bank cards and government departments were also increased. This is great for Iraq. The government advisor emphasizes that bank structuring decisions are a crucial step towards comprehensive economic reforms. Prime Minister Mauser Mohammed Shaleh views reconstructing government banks as a processor to economic reforms. He believes that the reforms aims to improve competitiveness and efficiency. The Council of Ministers approved a banking reform plan, including direct contracts with Ernst & Young for reconstructing Rafidain and Rashid banks, merging industrial banks, and merging national insurance companies. The Kurdish MP emphasizes Sudan's success in the dollar crisis at the most critical step during his visit to Washington. The Patriotic Union of the Kurdistan Representatives, Iman Abdel Razak, believes the success of the Sudanese Prime Minister Mohammed Shia al-Sudani is addressing the dollar crisis is the most important step for the Sudanese government, if completed with his visit to Washington, and we're going to get into those details right now. Before we get into Sudani's visit, first let's talk about the meaning of American immunity on Iraq's money. In 2003, former U.S. President George W. Bush issued an executive order to protect the Development Fund for Iraq, depositing oil sale proceeds to prevent legal prosecution. Over 2 decades later, successive U.S. administration continued to review this order and order-related orders related to Iraq and its funds. And in the recent, Joe Biden signed a decree extending the state of national emergency related to the situation in Iraq for another year, stating that there are still obstacles to ordinary reconstruction of Iraq, the restoration and maintenance of peace and security in the country, and the development of political administration and economic institutions in Iraq. The executive order is extended to protect the development fund for Iraq and other properties in which Iraq is interested. It states that Iraq's reservation, judgment, decree, and other judicial proceedings against the Development Fund for Iraq or Iraqi oil and petroleum products are their proceeds, and obligations related to their sales and marketing shall be considered null and void. The order prohibits all U.S. citizens and residents within the United States and any entity regulated under U.S. law from filing lawsuits against Iraqi Fund. The Development Fund for Iraq was established after 2003 and before the funds for Iraqi oil sales were placed in an account managed by the United Nations under Oil for Food programs. In mid-1990s, a U.S. Security Council resolution on oil for food allowed the sales of part of Iraqi oil in exchange for the purchasing of medicine and food during the Saddam Hussein regime invasion of Kuwait in 1990. However, they paid back all their dues. So will Iraq get back their sovereignty, and will Iraq be capable of controlling their own funds is the questions that I have. It seems that they're managing. However, there are still many issues like currency auctions, getting laws passed, and seating their governments. Let's continue. Interesting enough, speaking about the dollar, Parliament Finance suggests re-raising exchange rates primarily to address the issues of oil revenues. Adnan Zafri, a member of the Parliamentary Finance Committee, has emphasized the need to raise the dollar exchange rate in Iraqi markets to stimulate economic developments. He stated that the current exchange rate weakens the local industry and that the Iraqi oil export revenues are sent to the U.S. federal banks into account. The U.S. federal banks is aware of the difference between Iraq's imports of customs and the central bank, leading to change its trading finance mechanisms. Al-Zafri also highlights the non-payment of custom taxes and duties in its crucial role, indicating for the U.S. He criticizes the government of Kahimi for omitting the establishment of the dollar platform, stating that the Americans is pushing Iraq to reform the banking system and eliminate monetary dealings within the next 5 years. And while al-Sudani was in the U.S., the central bank is forming an Iraqi-American committee to address bank violations. Governor Ali Al-Alaq forms committees with the Treasury and the federal banks to address sanctions on sanctioned banks. Washington praised Iraq's 80% financial transfer file resolutions and international company road maps. Also, while they were there, al-Sudan from Texas discuss energy projects and introduce a new concept of its wealth explorations. Iraqi Prime Minister Mohammed Shia al-Sudani dismissed energy projects in the country during a meeting with American companies specializing in oil and gas. He highlighted the government's program for optimal investment in oil and gas and promoting of the fifth and sixth round of projects. Al-Sudani called on American companies to partner with the Iraqi private sector and emphasizes Iraq's importance in the energy markets. He also announced an extension of the application period for the fifth and sixth round. And the U.S. media is reporting a significant shift in Iraq's relationship with the United States. Iraqi Prime Minister Mohammed Shia al-Sudani visited the U.S. to establish bilateral relations, addressing the escalation in the region and potential for conflict. He highlighted the shift in Iraq's relationship with the U.S., focusing on economic, political, and critical aspects. Al-Sudani also discussed the first meeting of the Supreme Coordinating Committee of the Strategic Framework Agreement, focusing on energy, investment, transport, education, and climate change. And back in Iraq, al-Habasi's acquitted has been confirmed, and his potential return to presidency of parliament is now on the table. The Taqaddum party leader, Ammar al-Jamali, cited Shalan al-Karen's withdrawal from the presidential race as evidence of Mohammed al-Habasi's innocence of charge against him, stating that al-Karen's resigned without pressure or remains as an independent representative. And you've been watching Newsroom Weekly Review. I'm Chella Smith with your Middle East U.S. entertainment news on reforms and economics of Iraq. I try to bring you the latest Dinar news without having to keep up with all the different outlets. I'm here on YouTube every Friday, so don't forget to subscribe and turn those notification bells on. If you like my content, give me a thumbs up. If you really like my content, you can always seed a super chat or a super thanks in the comment section below. Again, thank you for being a subscriber, and thank you for visiting Newsroom Chella Smith for your trusted Dinar news. I'll see you guys next week. Take care. Make sure you join us Fridays, 4 p.m. with Newsroom Updates with Chella Smith Entertainment News.